after lunch session, and we are going to have very interesting panel on international life science platforms and bionetworking, putting back people in the platform. As you all know, life science collaborations and life science enterprises are expanding all over the world, and many national and transnational understandings, networkings, and configurations have been defined and redefined. And in this context, we are trying to kind of understand how these things are developing in different locations. And when we talk about life science, it is not, in this panel, is not limited only to stem cells science. We also have speakers covering genomics, prenatal diagnosis, and other areas. And so I have to introduce myself. I'm Prasanna Kumar Patra, and this panel is being co-organized by me and Professor Margaret Sibum Faulkner. And we have 5 speakers who have to, and the panel is for 2 hours. So we'll be kind of giving 15 minutes each to each speaker. Then we will have 2 minutes for quick clarification. Then in the end, we'll have half an hour for panel discussion. So I would request all the panelists to stick to their time. Then first of all, I think we would go by the sequence that is printed in the program. First we would have Klaus Hoyer, then we will have Ken Birds, then Luca Marelli, then Mauro Torini, and then myself. I will also be presenting on paper because one of the invited panelists, Suzanne Kelly, unfortunately she kind of could not participate, so I'll be presenting on paper. So first I would request Klaus Hoyer. Klaus is a professor at the section of Health Services Research, Department of Public Health, University of Copenhagen. Klaus received his PhD in medical ethics from University of Umma. And Klaus is interested in the organization and regulation of healthcare systems, in particular with respect to introduction of new medical technologies. His areas of expertise is ethics as a form of regulation in relation to human body hybrids. And he has worked mainly in research in biobanking, stem cells, property issues, forensic biobanking, public-private partnership, and public perceptions of genetics. So now I welcome Klaus.
Thank you very much. Generous introduction, already revealing my intellectual promiscuity. And thank you very much to both Prasanna and Mark for organizing this wonderful event, and as Prasanna said, for allowing some of us who are not working on stem cells to participate anyway. Though it's not about stem cells, I will talk about bionetworking in a particular sense, because I'm talking about a project which is focusing on international collaborations. I'll do so based on a project called Global Genes, Local Concerns, which is a cross-disciplinary project headed by a scholar from law, Jens School, where we collaborate in order to understand what collaborations is all about. The particular instance of collaborations that we are looking upon is the construction of a biobank, which assembles samples from more than 90 countries with the aim of creating a sorted map of chromosomal breakpoints. Mostly, this is a matter of getting samples out of diagnostic labs and using them for specialized sequencing in order to create this map. But in some instances, samples are taken from new patients, and they are also used for more refined research purposes. And this is taking place in Denmark, Finland, and Pakistan. And together with Dr. Aru Tukpasela, I have decided to look upon those more refined instances of research and explore here the hopes and the concerns of the people actually donating the samples and the healthcare information associated with it, but also the researchers and their research partners in Denmark, Finland, and Pakistan. I must provide a little caveat. This is very much work in progress. I'm basically still in the middle of everything. I just finalized interviewing the last Danish donors, and we are still trying to figure out what this is all about. So please forgive me just trying to make sense of this by way of talking to you about it. Well, basically what we're interested in, Ara and I, is to try to figure out what travels, where does it travel, and how does it travel. And we were invited by Prasanna and Margaret to think about the map as a platform. You could think of it as an infrastructure. You say, what travels, where does it travel, how does it travel? This is a matter of creating flows. But by thinking of it as a platform, we take it as an invitation to look upon the map as a social material enterprise, a co-production of science and society, but where the platform itself has a sense of agency. It does more than intended. We base the paper that I'm presenting here on interviews with the Danish researchers, but also their research partners from Pakistan, from Finland, and from Denmark, and interviews with the Danish donors, but also on participant observation in the lab and in all these meetings where we see the collaboration taking place. So the focus that I will put on the paper that I'm presenting now is to explore what travels where and how by way of looking upon what actually flows, what are the non-flows, and what are the unintended consequences. What does the platform also produce? What are the overflows of traveling information? And these three flows, non-flows and overflows, is what structured the following parts of the presentation. So beginning with the flows. Here comes kind of a confession. I imagined, and so did Aro, that we could study a process where samples and healthcare information could just travel somehow unaccompanied by all the hopes and the concerns of the people actually donating it. And it was about how do we disentangle samples from local concerns. How do they become global genes without local concerns attached to them? But actually, we realized that a lot of social concerns travel along with these samples. It's part of making them flow. So there are different ways in which the flows are facilitated. And in Denmark and Finland, basically it's about these two countries having registers of all chromosomal breakpoints which are known, and then inviting people through the registers to participate in research. But they never just go into the register, click the button, and then send a letter out to people. Instead, what they do is to go into the health records and scrutinize them to find the personal narratives of their hopes and concerns, to try to figure out, is it at all reasonable to invite them to participate in research? Are they aware of their chromosomal rearrangements? And once they've done that, they send personal letters. They have phone calls with most of them. There are more than 3,000 people participating in Denmark. They have also, and that was really surprising to me, in addition to the registers and the build-up of all the medical information, they actually have a hidden register of the emotional load, where they keep track of all the conversations they've had with people, where they record their hopes and their concerns, where they take notes of who knows what in this family, who can we tell what about. So it's not disentangled from the hopes and concerns of the people. Interestingly, a lot of the donors felt that the very idea of anybody looking into their health records or being interested in their emotional concerns was really infringing. Get out of my bag, just use my blood. And the most common thing would be like this young woman who said, I think technologies have progressed very far, but probably they cannot figure out anything personal about me by looking at my blood. So you can actually do research on me by way of not being interested in me as a person, but being interested in my body alone. Still, others were really dependent upon this kind of register of emotional load. An elderly gentleman, for example, had never told his kid that the kid carried this chromosomal rearrangement, and he thought of it as a very sensitive issue. He had a lot of worries about it. And when he got the invitation to participate in research, he immediately thought, what can happen tomorrow? How about my grandchildren? I don't know, are they also going to be summoned? Well, then I need to inform my kid first. And he commented, there's an element of fear in all of this. So, in order to create the flow, it's not just a question of pushing the button, getting the register data, and then doing the research. They have to do a lot of social work in order to create a flow of information material. On the surface, this looks quite different when we think of how samples are gathered in Pakistan. But actually, there's also a lot of similarities. Only the pathway to the samples are very different. In Pakistan, there's no registers, and there are no existing records of who have the chromosomal rearrangements. So persons are identified locally by way of stories of family histories of mutations. And then the Danish research funding is used to offer them genetic counseling and diagnostic services. So care is an entry point for participating in research, and the two are deeply intertwined. But it's not like people just grab out and want the diagnostic services and the genetic counseling. Actually, they got to trust the people delivering it. So the Pakistani research partner has a strategy of recruiting research students locally from different regions in order to always have somebody who's known to the village to enter the village first. Then you have these ties of trust, where the research student trusts the local Pakistani researcher, and the Pakistani researcher travels along with the samples to Denmark to do the research. And then they trust the Danish researchers to use the samples with care, still actually having a lot of the concerns traveling along with the samples. But the flows also means that it's somewhat difficult sometimes to establish that trust. And if we should just understand why they can't just go out into Swartpath Valley and say, I want samples, I offer you genetic counseling, we have to also understand how that is understood, that act of asking for blood samples. And you're probably all aware in this room about the ways in which Osama bin Laden was said to be identified via fake vaccination campaigns. And some of you might also have heard about a Danish newspaper publishing cartoons of the Prophet. And this is a picture of the Danish flag being burned in Faisalabad. So one of the Pakistani researchers explained here, as you see, that if you go to that area, he's talking about the Swartpath, and any member of the team is not known by the people where we go, then they will ask, who are you? What is your objective? What will you do? What will you give this blood to CIA? What is the purpose of this? So samples cannot travel without having these links of personal trust in this case. But there are also things which do not travel. There are also things which need to stop traveling in order for things to travel along. And it's interesting, the first thing is that all the diagnostic labs, for example, they have to sign an agreement that if you work with the Copenhagen hub, you won't work with other hubs, because there's a competition getting on who's the first to make the saturated map. Also, Pakistani researchers have to agree on a particular set of diseases where they'll only work with Copenhagen researchers in this. So trust is also a part of creating non-flows, people who are cut off out of the potential bionetworking. But there's also other forms of flows which are stopped. And some of them we might think of as strategic ignorance, because there are things which cannot be said if these flows should be established. So there are stories which are stopped. And one of them is actually also about not telling people where their samples go. You can't say these samples in many places, you can't say these samples are going to Denmark. And one of the Pakistani researchers explained to me, it's not to hide anything, but if you talk too detailed, they get confused and they think that you're going to sell their blood or you're using it for a different purpose. In many cases, we don't write anything in front of the patients. They become very reluctant due to their past experiences with people grabbing their land when they place their signatures anywhere. So they're very reluctant to sign anything. And I know Prasanna and Margaret have come across this phenomenon elsewhere as well. And you could say, but this is a violation of ethical codes. But it's a violation of a particular set of ethical codes which see the thrust of ethics as being about being informed, making up your mind, is this what I want? And then you accept the full package. But this is actually a step-by-step process. where they are not trying to fool them. They are trying to make it possible to deliver a particular form of service that they think they need in these families, and it's the only way of getting it done. So I think we would, if we think of it as just, you know, an exercise of power, we don't really understand the motivation for these non-flows of information. I could say a lot more about what doesn't flow, but just to stay within time limits, I'll move on to the overflows, all that which travels unintendedly, what the platform also produces. Here, I would like to point out that it instigates a lot of negotiations about disease etiology. I find it really, really striking when talking to the Danish donors that practically all of them have felt that just filling in a questionnaire of potential questions of what this might relate to, in that is, what chromosomal rearrangements might relate to, is seen as information that they use to renegotiate things in their family history. This was the cause of that, or now I understand this, or so it's actually seen as explanations for disease. But it immediately sparks discussions as well about genetic responsibility, as it's often termed in the literature. Did I cause this to my daughter? Was I the cause of that for that? Who can I still have kids? Can I still do things? All of this is totally unrelated to what counts as medical evidence, but it's nevertheless what the platform produces. It produces negotiations about what is the cause of disease in ways which we can only think of as an overflow and an unintended one. A lot of that relates to the basic interpretive flexibility of the information delivered. That, and people have a lot of wrong expectations about what scientists and healthcare systems might do. So, for example, there were examples of parents who came up when they had the invitation to participate in research and volunteered a story that they never told before about a kid being adopted, because they thought, they'll find out now. And of course the scientists wouldn't have told, but now it was just, you know, the interpretive flexibility instigated a lot of overflows. And there are also other overflows relating to insurance issues and concerns about whether or not I'm a responsible person when I donate blood, or should I deregister as an organ donor. Things which has no medical relevance, but which is nevertheless what the platform produces. So to conclude, I think it's important that we move beyond a simple framing of research ethics as simply a matter of being given an informed choice and then the rest is easy. I think that the platform thinking is part of alerting us to all the social implications of research and the ways in which there's a lot of social issues being part of framing what can move and what can't move. And unless we appreciate these basic points about the social embeddedness, we will not appreciate the extent to which the medical work, all the technicalities, all the science affects much more than technical expertise. It's not just a matter of being given an informed choice, and if we want research ethics to address also all the social work going into the making of a platform, then we also need to make this into something which can be articulated and spoken about. So, on that note, I'll thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Very interesting presentation. I hope we will have maximum 2 minutes for quick clarification. Only clarification, not only clarification. Questions, please keep it towards the end. We will have panel discussion.
Everything was crystal clear.
Okay.
Obviously.
Thank you very much, Lars. And next we have Kane Birds. Kane is Assistant Professor at Department of Social Science at University of York, Canada. The Canadian one. York University. Yes. Kane received his PhD from Oxford